Greenford is a London suburb with a population of around 50,000 people and an industrial history.
Greenford is an area of London that is in the borough of Ealing. It's got a high crime rate, a mixed population with a diverse community.
But in 2014, Greenford was rocked when a young man was attacked on its streets during Friday's rush hour.
This was a scene of absolute mayhem. A man lying in the road, stopping the traffic, passers-by all around rushing to see what they could help.
First aid was being given by a number of people, including a bus driver and a couple of other car drivers, because it was at the height of the rush hour.
Uniform officers would have been dispatched initially to respond to the report that somebody had been stabbed. Those officers would provide first aid in the first instance in support with the ambulance service, and then once the seriousness of the injuries that had been sustained were established, a call came into my office as the on-call homicide investigation team. I sent officers to the hospital who would have started to commence inquiries, check any ID documentation, any personal effects, and from there seek to identify who he was and make contact with the family.
The victim is 24-year-old Dean Mayley. Police officers now call Dean's mother, Donna, to inform her of the attack.
There was a knock on the door, and it was two policewomen. So they came in and they said, "Do you have a son?" I said, "Yes, I've got two." And she said, "Dean Mayley." I said, "Yes, my son." So she said, "Well, there's been an incident," she said, "and we need to take you to the hospital." I said, "The hospital? Why, what's going on?" So she said, "Something's happened." I said, "Well, what's happened?" She said, "Well, he's been stabbed."
As the hunt for the killers commenced, Matt Bonner acted quickly to categorise the murder.
It was a Category B murder, and that was managed locally as a critical incident, and a full homicide investigation commenced.
OK, so Category B, for what reasons?
So Category B, the identity of the offenders were not readily known, but the investigation, my assessment was the investigation could be readily managed with the resources that I had available to me.
Now, one of the things that I know from personal experience is how important it is to start making policy decisions early. So what were some of your really early policy decisions at the scene?
In any investigation, there's a range of lines of inquiry, such as CCTV, witnesses, forensics, but really there's a finite number of resources, and the challenge for an SIO is to understand where they're most likely to make most impact. And so I had assessed the scene, understand what was going on, and in terms of the staff that I had available to investigate, allocate those particular lines of inquiry. And in some cases that might be that you believe that the forensic retrieval is likely to identify suspects. In this case, I felt that it was going to be witnesses and CCTV collection. I believe that CCTV was likely to give me the first significant step in identifying the suspects.
As police began to gather CCTV, the immediate murder scene had been sealed off to the public.
What we pretty much quickly believed at that time was that after the stabbing, the three suspects had run off. They hadn't discarded anything.
The problem with this investigation was there was very little contact between the person that used the knife and Dean. So the usual forensic opportunities weren't available to the investigation team.
The CCTV on this house became particularly crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. Initial assessment of the scene identified, you could see that those CCTV cameras straight away. We recognised that if they were real cameras, they were going to be critical, and that turned out to be the case. In fact, if the assault on Dean had happened anywhere else along this road, I don't think it would have been caught on CCTV. There were no other cameras that would have covered it at that time. So Graham, this is the CCTV from the scene. And as you can see, there's two cameras on the house. The first thing you see is Dean walking along the road there on his own, and he's approached from behind by firstly one male. And and then a short while later 2 more follow on behind. This is the other camera angle, and you see the first male approach Dean, and at this point, if you look in his hand here, you can see that he's got a knife in his right hand. The second 2 males are walking round and further up and block Dean's exit. You'll notice Dean's got his hands in his pockets. He never takes his hands out of his pockets. He's not a threat to anybody at all. The second 2 males now return and completely surround Dean. And without any provocation, Dean's stabbed in the chest.
Wow. And it sort of demonstrates how they sort of hunt him down, don't they? They sort of pin him against the sort of fence there, and then they sort of corral him in to a position, don't they?
We've talked about the importance that the CCTV had in terms of the actions of each of the people that were there. And this shows they were acting as a group. Mm-hmm. This isn't the actions of one person who's gone rogue. Really bravely, Dean actually starts to give chase. He follows them for about 4 or 5 steps, and then turns and staggers into the road looking for some help, where he's supported by members of the public.
Broad daylight, traffic going by, it's chilling, isn't it?
Absolutely terrible assault.
Matt and his team had widened the search for CCTV evidence to local business premises nearby, from cameras on local transport.
I sat down in the office with one of my detective sergeants, and we trawled through all the intelligence reports for Greenford over about a 2 or 3 months period. And what we were quickly able to establish was there had been about 3 or 4 robberies in that area. Quite significantly, a number of those robberies had targeted young men wearing North Face jackets. And we certainly know that Dean was wearing a North Face jacket on the afternoon that he was sadly stabbed to death. And through that intelligence, we were able to identify a young male by the name of Michael Mensa, and the fact that he was the owner of a light blue Fiat Punto. My team of officers who were out trawling for CCTV, we shared that information with them, and within about 5 minutes, they phoned back into the office to say, look, interestingly enough, we've picked up CCTV from the main shopping area where Dean would have had to have walked through on his way back home, and we have got a light blue Fiat Punto parked up outside the KFC, and at some stage they were able to capture 3 youths going into the Punto and driving away from the KFC, almost shadowing Dean's walk back home.
Part of the CCTV that we had, we coincided and overlaid with a passing bus. The CCTV from the bus showed that they were getting into a blue Fiat motor vehicle. The bus caught the registration number, and that car was registered to Michael Mensa. Michael Mensa was well known to police, and in the months preceding the murder of Dean, he himself had come to notice on a number of occasions. He was known to be involved in street robbery.
Matt and his team knew Mensa was the man in the car, but they needed to be cautious about their next move.
Shortly before Dean was killed, Mensa was arrested in possession of a knife, and the police seized his mobile phone. And they still had that phone in their possession when they identified Mensa's car and the men getting into the car. Open source is where you look for stuff that's in the public domain. So you look at people's Twitter account, you look at people's Facebook account. You don't need any special authority to go in and look at it. And because we live in a world which is intrinsically linked to those kinds of information platforms, the police are able to use that to identify people and piece together key bits of information.
We were able to identify that he had a contact by the name of Bones. What Matt Bonner did was to take that a step further and search Twitter using that street name of Bones, and a number of names came up, including this Bones Santana 97. And when he went into that account, he realised that there was a picture of the same young man wearing the same hoodie with the distinctive white zip. There was also a birthday greeting from his sister about a week before, on the 3rd of February, wishing her little bro Jamal a happy birthday. So we had a date of birth, we had a street name, and we had a first name of Jamal. We trawled our intelligence databases. It was clear that he'd never come to police attention before, which is why we then took the step that we would ask schools and colleges to search their databases for a young man by the name of Jamal with a 3rd of February 97 date of birth. And that's how we identified Jamal Jones and his home address in Acton.
Jones and Mensah were now identified. Matt Bonner needed to make a critical decision. Jamal Jones was an unknown quantity.
To do these kind of entries at about 6 o'clock in the morning.
Jamal was called out to the front door by armed officers behind shields who put a red dot on his chest and instructed that he follow their instructions. Clearly the assessment was that he was a dangerous individual. He'd been suspected of being responsible for a murder. But what was surreal was that as that was happening, the police helicopter hovered up over the rooftops as well. So we used all of the toys available for that arrest. At the same time and on the same day, but at a different location, we arrested Michael Mensah and seized his vehicle.
Let's talk about how you use the media to get your message out.
I then had to think about what I was going to release and at what time, and that took some careful thought as well. We had charged Mensah and Jones, and it was attached to the press release to say that we are still looking for these other two. I felt that the people in the world that were most interested in what had happened to Mensah and Jones were going to be those two other suspects, their best friends. I didn't know how that was going to work. I didn't know what it was going to provoke. I hoped that there'd be a split loyalty and someone would phone us and tell us who those other two people were.
But what actually happened was what Mark Bonner would have least predicted.
What I didn't expect was those two people themselves to walk into a police station and say, I understand you're looking for us.
Ryan Beresford, who is known as Grills, and Miguel Lieber, who's known as Butch, turned up at the local police station saying, right, look, you've posted our picture in the paper. What is this all about? They were immediately arrested for the murder of Dean. So it's fair to say that sort of within a week or so, we've identified the 4 young men. They've been arrested and they're now remanded in custody.
The suspected murderers were behind bars, but the team still needed to prove they had committed the crime.